Welcome to the Veterans in Politics Talk Show. Join us every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Pacific Time, live stream on Facebook.
Welcome to the Joint Veterans Endorsement Interviews for Non-Judicial Candidates. On the outset, I'd like to formally recognize and thank our sponsoring organizations for making today's event possible. Judge Mary Perry, Clark County District Court Family Division Department P, Christine Brewer, Clark County District Court Family Division Department S, Veterans in Politics International, and Nevada Veterans Association. Would also like to extend our sincere appreciation to our additional sponsors and community partners whose support helps ensure a professional, fair, and transparent endorsement process. We're honored to have you all with us today. Before we begin the interview, I'd like to go over the rules and the format. First, each panel member will introduce themselves by stating their name and the organization that they represent. Next, you'll be given an opportunity to introduce yourself. Please state the office that you're running for and explain why that you are running for this office. Next, we will begin the interview portion. Each panel member will ask you a question. You can address the panel member. Just also be mindful that we're talking to a student, to an audience also. So if you maybe give them some eye contact, say hello. Shout out to mom, hi mom, all that stuff, whatever. You'll have 1 minute and 30 seconds to answer a question. When you have 30 seconds left, you'll be shown a yellow card. And when your time is up, you'll be shown a blue card. Then if you can wrap up your statement at that point, and we'll move on to the next question. At the end, we will give you a moment for some closing statements. With that, we'll start with the introductions.
My name is Gary White. I am representing not only the Montford Point Marine Association, but also the Veterans in Politics International.
John Frank, represent Politics and International in Las Vegas, born 1966.
Martin Walker, Nevada Veterans Association.
Jeff Keach with the Deadbeat Chronicles and Nevada Veterans Association.
Nice to meet all of you. Well, my name
Microphone, please.
Okay. My name is Jill Douglas, and I'm running to be the next Assemblywoman in Assembly District 37, which we are actually in Assembly 37 right now. I'm running because I think that our seniors, our families, and our veterans deserve more. We have not had proper representation. Nevadans have a lot of pain points, and I think it's important that their voices be heard and that those pain points be addressed.
Thank you. Gary?
Hi there.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great.
I have two questions for you. Well, I have one major question for you. My thing is on transportation here in the Valley. We need a light rail system very badly in the Valley. We have a state-of-the-art veterans hospital facility that nobody can get to. We're growing by leaps and bounds as far as our population. We're spreading out. The highways are getting no bigger. Some of the costs for registration of a vehicle is unattainable for your usual rank and file that works the service jobs, things of that nature. A light rail system would be very performative here in the Valley. Plus, it'll produce about 5,000 jobs. And the reason I can throw out numbers like that, because I happen to be a transportation specialist. What are your opinions on a light rail system, i.e. like Phoenix, for instance, something that'll service the Valley? Would you be supportive of that?
I definitely think that we need to bring a panel together and explore those options. I do think that transportation is a problem. And the cost of vehicles and the cost of auto insurance prohibit many people from being able to purchase a vehicle. And, as I have toured many other states, I used to have an office down in Phoenix, so I'm very familiar with their system. I have vacationed in Chicago. I'm familiar with theirs. One of the things that happens a lot when you go into a lot of the bigger cities is you can leave your hotel and jump on a light rail and get around town. And so I definitely think that those options should be explored. I know where the Veterans Hospital is. I'm married to a veteran. I'm a mom of a veteran. So, where it is, it's out there off of, Pecos and the 215. And transportation is a problem for many people. And we need to explore all alternative means of transportation to ensure that every person who lives in the valley has a means to get around.
Good answer, by the way. And you like Chicago, huh? That's my hometown.
The crime has gone way up, but it's a beautiful city, and there's so much to do.
Crime is not going up. Crime is just being publicized.
Okay.
Trust me.
Hello, John, Frank, Veteran Politics. How you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Okay, so tell me some of the core responsibilities and job duties you get to do as an assemblywoman.
Well, thank you for asking that. Unlike most people who runs for office, I have participated in 3 legislative sessions as a citizen, concerned citizen activist. So according to the Nevada Constitution, I think it's Article 4, which has about 39 sections, but the sections that actually have to do with the duties and responsibility of an assembly person, there's really 5 core functions. You know what? You enact laws, you appropriate funds, you provide oversight, you serve on committees, and the most important one is you're supposed to serve your constituents. And that's why I'm running, because the constituents are not being served properly.
Thank you, Yana. Very well said.
Thank you.
All right. Well, good afternoon. Martin Walker, Nevada Veterans Association. So I've heard several candidates who've been very vocal about ending tax abatements and subsidies for large corporations. Proponents argue that business-friendly incentives are necessary to keep Nevada competitive with other states in our region and to help diversify Nevada's economy. At the same time, people are seeing how those same types of actions are affecting other places like New York, Seattle, Chicago, as businesses move from there to places like Florida, Texas, Indiana. What alternative economic development tools would you propose, or ideas or your thoughts on things that could affect other businesses in Nevada, keep us competitive with other states in the region, and help mitigate our reliance on the hospitality sector?
That's an excellent question, because it's one that I constantly ask myself. I was a businesswoman, and I started a business from scratch here in Las Vegas. And I recognized very quickly that we have very burdensome legislation, a lot of bureaucracy and red tape that prevents businesses from opening and getting a fast start. And I always questioned why, and I eventually operated a 3-state operation, Nevada, Arizona, and Colorado. And I would see all these businesses move to Colorado and move to Arizona, and I would say, why not Nevada? And so a lot of it is the ease of doing business. Are we an easy state to do business with? We're not. We're very, a lot of red tape. I've talked to developers, and they'll buy a piece of land, and we need housing, right? Permitting process is 36 months. We have to address things like that. We have to be easier to do business with. We have to also make sure our communities are safe and we have good education, a good educational system, because when you're trying to diversify and bring other businesses in, they're going to look at, if they're going to bring in employees, what are the schools like and what's the safety? So we have to address those things, all go hand in hand. I'm against transferable tax credits because most of the businesses that we might entice with those don't need them. And they go to the casinos, and they were getting less tax revenue from the casinos. And so I don't like the nature of tax credits being transferable.
Jill, coming back to Jeff here with Nevada Veterans Association, it was a pleasure. My wife and I had a chance to sit with you at the Veterans Gala
Right, yes.
a couple of months back.
I knew I recognized you.
Very good to see you.
had
Very good
a
to see
hat
you.
on then.
Being that Southern Nevada, Las Vegas is the marriage and divorce capital of the world, our court systems are seeing a lot of business. When we look at education required for adopting a child, would you support a system that was required for education for lifelong legal consequences? So in other words, before folks become a parent of an adopted child, before they become parents themselves, requiring some sort of classes on co-parenting there.
I think it is important to recognize the rights of both the mother and the father. And I think children are served best, assuming that their parents are, you know, good parents, right? I think it's so bad for one parent to try to remove the other parent from a child's life. You know, it takes two people to create a child, and that child needs both of those individuals in their life. You know, I think that a lot of things like that used to be offered like in high school and kind of like different type of home economics classes and classes like that where you learn more life skills. And I would like to see more life skills offered. And yes, which then relates to how we get along with people, how we handle our anger, how we communicate. These are all necessary skills. And yes, I think it would be good for to get those in our school system, and then certainly to get them as individuals navigate the legal system.
Sure. If divorce is unavoidable, as sometimes it is, if we're being a community and a nation of blended families, we might as well do it right and do it better than we're doing it right. I appreciate your answer.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, my turn again. One of the other things that has been mentioned, debated, talked about is the enforcement of the immigration. First off, I don't believe anybody is illegal. However, we do have laws that are in place that are being enforced, but sometimes on more than one occasion has been very heavy-handed. We're supposed to be getting rid of the drug dealers and the murderers and the rapists, but we're going to people's place of work and going to schools and dragging people away. How do we make, or what are your ideas on how do we make the enforcement of the immigration process more humane?
Well, there's a lot of conversation to be had in that question. So, you know, I have listened to our sheriff multiple times, and I know that he is making efforts to work through the local detention centers and jails, so that if that is going to take place, communities, neighborhoods, schools are not disrupted, and ICE works through that system to be made aware of the fact of if somebody's being released. I also know that many times ICE does not show up, but it's my understanding from conversations I've had that in Clark County they really are trying to put an emphasis on, first of all, it's federal law, and ICE is a federal branch, and they're tasked with doing their job. We could have a whole different conversation about how we feel about that job, but it is a department of the government. They do have a job to do, but I do think that in all things, whether it's the court system, or the correctional system, we need to focus on doing things in the most humane way that we can.
What are your ideas? What do you think we could do differently?
Well, I know that's a big question, because I do have a little bit of a difference of opinion, in terms of the importance of border security, because I think to have national security, we do have to have border security. And I've been to many, many things, including I've personally met with retired border chief Clem, and we've talked about the inhumanity of what happens when you have open borders. And I do think that we need to make sure we have legal systems that are fair and consistent so people know what those systems are, and then those systems can be followed. But I also recognize that from a public safety point of view, if in fact it has been identified that there are people that are here who have long histories of criminal activity, that those do need to be addressed. And if our community is safer by removing people from those people from the community, then as long as we're doing it in a humane way, and we're doing it, keeping it outside of neighborhoods and outside of schools. I do think that working through the correctional centers is a more effective, humane way to do it. You're welcome.
Hello, John Frank, Veterans in Politics. With the family court system and the CPS and what's going on today across our whole country and actually in the world, currently at this time, there's approximately 3,800 to 4,000 children in CPS care, waiting in foster care, waiting for foster care. In Clark County, those numbers are approximately anywhere from 35, 36, 3,700 at a time up there. Waiting to go through. There's been a lot of fictitious allegations, unsupported foundation, plagiarism, also straight out fat lies about what's going on. Families are getting separated, children are getting separated. They're not getting returned over fictitious allegations and money. How do you feel about this and the current state of CPS and in our court systems in Nevada?
Yeah. Whoa. I'm very concerned about Child Protective Services because, I worry about the oversight. I worry about the protection of children. I mean, my hot button is any child that is being victimized. I mean, I created a Bear Hugs for Hurts program where we provide the Metro Police Department with stuffed animals so that the patrol officers can have those. And when they're called to victims of child trauma, they have a hug for the child to help comfort them. And they tell me the children's eyes light up. But going back to Child Protective Services, sometimes you just really have to take a look at an operation and say, is it working? Is it effective? Is it getting the job done? If it's not, you have to revamp it. And I think, they have to clearly be able to identify what are their duties and responsibilities, who is responsible for making sure those duties and responsibilities are carried out. The protection of children has got to be up front and center. And if individuals in those departments are not making sure those children are protected in the way they're supposed to be, and there also needs to make, I think in all things if the parents are remorseful and they're really trying to work to rebuild that relationship with that child, then, we need to be partners in trying to keep those families together if it can, go that route. Certainly there's going to be some situations where that's not going to be possible, but that should be in the forefront.
I'm quivering here because she's kind of stealing some of my thunder over here.
I did it again?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes. Yeah, no, you're not. All right. So I guess in the last session, the governor vetoed SB 340, which sought to change our summary eviction process. We're the only state in the union who has the this process where the tenant has to basically sue themselves and provide their own lawsuit against themselves to get a hearing. And I understand that some judges have latitude and some of them choose to exercise that latitude. But what happens is many veterans face administrative delays in getting their assistance, and sometimes in the interim, while they're waiting on their money to come, they end up getting evicted, and that helps expand our homeless veteran population. So, what are your thoughts or your theories on reintroducing, SB 340? Obviously, in a different number, next legislation, next session, that could help support reducing the mandatory stay to those pending applications. So not just anyone, but those who we can prove that they have application waiting, even if it's just for veterans and not the public at large. What is your theory on helping veterans in that way?
That's another. My heart's always with veterans, obviously. In fact, I think I have a really strong path to victory to become the next Assemblywoman in 37. And one of the committees I would like to serve on is Government Affairs because it oversees veteran services. I would like to see us bring more things into town, like the Tunnels to Towers, to provide homes for veterans. That might help alleviate some of that. Certainly, if we know that the delays in the system is what's causing the problem, that has to be looked at. And if we, provide services to other people, are we always providing those same services to veterans? Our veterans, in my opinion, should be like at the top. It's our top responsibility to help support those people who are willing to put on a uniform and serve our country. And the last thing that I would want to see happen is any veteran to be able to lose, the shelter over their head and be kicked to the streets. Sometimes you do have to balance some things with the responsibility of landlords who own buildings who continue to have to pay mortgage payments on them. But I think if you can create a partnership between like mortgage companies and like hardships, you should have hardship exceptions to where mortgage companies won't penalize the owner of the property, and therefore you can create a timeline until those benefits kick in.
Back to Jeff here with Nevada Veterans Association. Real quick question: do you happen to know Edgar Rodriguez with Shine a Light? You mentioned Tunnel to Tower. The Shine a Light guys are doing the same thing.
A
in the
lot of
Vegas
those
tunnels.
individuals. And so I'm sure one time or another, I know Jason and several of the individuals there. I actually have a heart of service. I grew up obviously in a military family, and I learned service before self at a young age. And so, the work that those individuals do, like the Shine a Light Foundation and those organizations, it's critical work, and I would love to partner with them in some regards because it's good work that they do, and it's just a shame that we have anyone in that situation.
Well, this may not that might not have been a bad segue for this question. Put your seatbelt on.
Oh.
What does separation of church and state mean to you in practice, not in theory?
Yeah. That's a very good question because I think a lot of people misconstrue actually what the Constitution says, what the intent is. Yeah. The intent is to keep the state from interfering with the ability to assemble and practice your freedom of religion. And we somehow have reversed it to where we think now churches have no rights sometimes to assemble or worship, and they have to be so afraid of the state. Yes, we've misconstrued actually what that means, and I think and I'll just give you an example. Like when COVID happened and they wanted to shut the churches down, but they didn't want to. But the churches were deemed not non-essential, but the liquor stores were essential, or other, the strip clubs were essential. I think that the government shouldn't interfere with the ability of someone to practice their religion.
Good answer. I think the part of the question where it talks about in practice and not in theory, I think that we have fallen away from being able to leverage simple Christian virtues, and that even those are shied away from in public institutions, especially education. So thank you for that.
Yes. I will say back on that real quickly. We were founded as a Christian nation, and most of our forefathers who wrote these documents were men of faith, and having escaped the tyranny of a king, they worked very hard to create the documents that we have to keep government, and they knew that government would grow and get too big and too greedy and take the rights away from the people and even the rights away from the states. So, the document, the Constitution is a wonderful document.
Boy, did you open a can of worms. Okay. I'm going to elaborate and ask you about this last statement that you just made about being founded as a Christian nation. All those men were slave owners, correct? That's not a very Christian thing to do. Now, not saying that, not just stopping there, but one of the things that we've also have a situation where the practice of your faith. I don't have a problem with that. I've had 3 or 4 different denominations on my record. And I want freedom to worship as I see fit. And everybody else should have that same right. But one of the things where we don't need to be a theocracy. There has to be some semblance of separation of church and state. There is still no taxation on churches, and they make a lot of money. And it should be that way because people have the right to do and point their money the right way. But one of the things that we do, what do you think is the stopgap point in that particular subject? Because once again, more people have been killed in the name of God than any other reason, including famine, war, things of that nature. Where do we draw a line on that? Now, I know this is going way beyond the State Assembly District 37. He opened the can. I'm gonna pour it out. But let's
The fine
let's
duties
come
and
back.
responsibilities of a state assembly woman are.
Yes, that's right. Let's go. Let's get back on the road here. We've talked about the protection of youth, transportation, eviction, family courts, humane enforcement of immigration. What are you going to do, or what would you advocate for to make your district that much more family friendly?
So first of all, Assembly 37 has Sun City Summerlin, so we have a high population of seniors. And from talking to them, I remain very worried about their fixed incomes. So we have to take a look at how we protect seniors from losing their homes because of increased property taxes that they can no longer afford property taxes. I would like to, I've been studying some modeling from Texas, even what they did years ago. I think it was Proposition 2 in California where they tried to do some capping of property taxes. I know when you mention property taxes, people always say yes, but the state needs that revenue. I think government has a spending problem. We have the money, but we have a spending problem. And when the legislative, in the last session, when Andy Matthews wanted to introduce a bill to create an Office of Inspector General, and what that would do would be auditing our books. And that was not even allowed to have a hearing. Why? You would think that every Nevadan is supportive of having transparency in our government and open books that get audited to find this money. Where is this money that we can alleviate some taxation from our citizens? You know, and that's one of the things that are of concern. And then the other thing certainly is attainable housing. This is where I think that when, it's a supply and demand. The more supply we can have, we can keep costs down. But we cannot have builders buying land to develop, and the permitting process takes 36 months before they can build. And we have to make sure that parents are allowed parental rights to choose the right school for their children based upon their needs.
Hello, John Frank, Veterans in Politics. I want to get back to you mentioned that you visited Child Haven. Can your experience and your thoughts and your feelings on that? I'm a survivor of CPS in the foster care system.
One of the things I've learned about Child Haven is they have a big wall around it, but they let kids climb over the wall, and then they go into these apartments that are vacant where drug dealing is going on. And I don't understand that. I don't understand when you are responsible for the care of children, their children, that you say you can't stop them from climbing over the walls of the facility and go into these drug houses and apartments. Higher walls, but more supervision. You don't let the children that are under your care.
Well, them guys,
Yeah.
a little bit. Them
Yeah.
guys are in Child Haven because there's just issues. Sometimes it's parenting. One parent wants to get after another, lies,
Right.
cheat, or something like that. But them kids, and you're right, it is an open gate policy. Them guys can't walk in and out, back and forth, and get loaded. Excuse me. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So the Keep Nevada Working Task Force is designed to remove barriers to veterans trying to entering the workplace or the workforce. The task force own recent findings suggest that we're still failing to fully utilize the skills of our veteran population due to licensure bottlenecks in high need fields such as healthcare and skilled trades. And this contributes to a lot of Nevadans post 9/11 veterans still facing higher unemployment rate than the general population. What is your thoughts on legislation that would help clear the bottleneck, or a theory on bypassing traditional red tape to Nevada's independent licensing boards to help veterans in certain career fields enter the workforce more quickly without spending years in remedial certification?
Martin, I think you must have heard me talk one time somewhere, because that's an issue I bring up. The military has the absolute best training programs anywhere. When people go in the military, whatever their career field is, they are trained, and more training. They're well trained. And some of those career fields aren't necessarily related to combat. Some of them are a phlebotomist, an x-ray technician, mechanics, multitude of careers like that. I would love to see our state be proactive with Nellis and just be known as a state that offers hiring bonuses to those transitioning from the military and allows the licenses that they had in the military to transition to our licensing. One of the things as a military spouse, when I moved here, we moved here from Tacoma, Washington, McCord Air Force Base. And I had worked in insurance and financial services for 3 years. And yet when I moved here, I still had to sit and go through all the pre-licensing education, and I had to sit for all the exams and pay for all the exams again. And that's a burden on the spouses. So we need to, again, cut out the red tape. When you have qualified people who've been doing that job, you should say, hey, your license is transferable. And the other thing, you could even put a wrapper around it and say, hey, for the first year, your employer has to do some heightened supervision. But they have the job skills. They don't need to have to spend the money jumping through hoops.
Back to Jeff with Nevada Veterans Association. I think it's my last question for the day here. Name one reform you would push for that would upset powerful institutions but benefit families.
I've got it. I will not get any money from these institutions, but I would love to see the utility companies not be allowed to pay legislators, like, make donations to their campaign. And the reason why is all of us, every citizen, we have seen our utility bills go up. Our electric bill has gone up. Our water bill has become punitive if we actually use more than 28 gallons or 28,000 gallons of water a month. If I go to water my baskets in my backyard because my flowers are dying, the water Gestapo knows I turned on the water in my backyard and I get a hate letter, And between Southwest Gas, NV Energy, and the Water District, all of our bills have, when I moved here 32 years ago, it was known as like we had really low cost utilities. And when you look up any legislator and look at their C&E reports, Shea Backus receives a ton of money from all of those entities. They are utility companies. They are monopolies. They should be doing things that are in the best interest of Nevadans, and they shouldn't need to have to entice legislators by making donations to their campaign in exchange for favorable votes. I would love to see a bill passed where we stand up as Nevadans and say, the utility companies are monopolies. They represent all of us. They should not be allowed to make donations to candidates.
Thank you.
Yay.
I'm going to be on there, I'm going to.
Military training should qualify.
Yes,
especially
yes.
EMTs.
Oh, yes.
Military
those
training
two.
should qualify, especially EMTs.
All of the medical fields, they know their stuff.
One of the greatest things, and this is my last question, is brief. Are you willing to put your name on the bottom line for that bill to try to push it through, to get the red tape cut, especially when it comes to the qualifications for people that we need for EMTs, firefighting, things of that nature? Are you going to do that?
Absolutely. And something else I would love to see done? I have heard there's as many as 168 different type veterans organizations that operate in Clark County. And I often wonder, is there any type of collaboration? What is the overlap? What does each one do? What are their, right? So I want to tell you something Casey DeSantis, Ron DeSantis' wife in Florida did. She created task forces to where there was one person responsible like for veterans. And so if there was a need, it started with this person. And this person knew all of the organizations, what their missions were, what they were providing, what help or assistance. And they could then take the need and find the right group to place it with, instead of an individual making phone call after phone call after phone call after phone call, getting the runaround. And some of these organizations, I hate to say it, but are not always operating totally ethically. Because I also know of a situation where a woman, her husband passed away, and she was a second wife, and she was having difficulty getting, and some organizations said, hey, pay us $5,000 and we'll take care of this for you, and did nothing for her, And so I think it's important to have a starting point. What I would love to do is have, I want to create in Assembly 37 a citizens task force, and have citizens representing the various organizations. There is no way any one legislature can be an expert in everything. So you know what you do? You go to the individuals who are the experts in those areas, and you say, hey, fill me in. What do I need to know? What needs to have happen here? And that's not happening in our communities, and that needs to happen. We need to have more citizens having a voice, helping the Assembly and the state Senate understand the issues better.
Is it basically like a citizens cabinet for the Assembly?
Yeah.
All right. So NDVS is currently prioritizing the BRAVE, which is the Behavioral Health Recovery and Veterans Education Program. It's designed to connect Nevada veterans and their family members to free and confidential mental health treatment. What would it take for you to sponsor or support a bill that provides the BRAVE initiative with the necessary state funding to reach veterans in rural parts of the state who currently can't drive or make it to mental health care?
It wouldn't take a lot. That's another one of my hot buttons is the mental health issues that the military face. A lot of, what the military has been through, what they've seen, what they've experienced. It's hard for just the general public to always have a great understanding of it. Mental health issues are big because a lot of addiction issues, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, these are mental health issues. And too often we criminalize it, and then we just make it that much harder for that person to get a job, keep a job. We're just mounting issue upon issue, making it harder. We need more mental health focus in the state.
I know I said last
You
question
did.
last time.
You're just going to throw another one in there?
Just one more, and I think this will kind of simmer things down to a very personal and simple level because I think it hits us all. So here goes. If your own child were to be caught in a high conflict custody battle in Southern Nevada today, would you trust this system to protect them? Why or why not?
Ooh. That's a tough one. Man. So I know a lot of really good judges. And then I've read stories and heard about judges that are not so good. And one of the questions I've asked judicial candidates is, would Nevada be better off if judges were appointed and then only maybe elected like a retention? Because here's my problem. We have judges that run for office and want to be a judge criminal cases, and they've never practiced criminal law. Maybe they've been a family attorney, or maybe you have a judge who's done bankruptcies and now he wants to be family court. It seems to me that, and the public doesn't know. It's hard enough for the public to be able to tell you they actually have an assembly person and a state senator, much less keep up with all the judicial candidates. And a lot of times when people go vote, when they don't know someone, they'll just pick the name they like the best. And is that really how judges should be selected? So I really struggle with the process of someone becoming a judge, and are we getting the best quality judges for each of these judicial departments? And it's not that I would not want the public to have a say, but I'm just saying in terms of judges, is the best course of action for the public to vote on 50 judges and they don't know them, don't know what they do, don't know the difference between district court, municipal court, any of these things, don't know the background of the people running to know if they're qualified for that race, and then just pick a name on a ballot? And so I really struggle with that, and I think sometimes it would be better off to have a process where you had those who are doing the job, who understand what the necessary qualities are to be a good judge. Would that not be maybe more a better way to select judges? And then the other problem I have is every office has term limits. An assembly person can serve 6 terms, 12 years, because it's 2 years terms. A state senate, it's 12 years. It's 3 terms because there's 4 years each. Judges have no term limits. Why is that? When everybody else who's elected in this state, governor, 8 years. Judges have no term limits.
I do think your answer really lends itself to the original question about potentially requiring education for upcoming parents, understanding the system with those lifelong legal consequences. And I will turn the mic back to you, fine sir.
Right. So this is the last question for real this time.
Now, are you sure? I've been told that before.
No, he said he don't speak for me.
Okay.
No. Okay. So, with nonpartisans being the largest voting bloc in Nevada, 47%, your path to victory depends on voters who may or may not share your party label. It's also an indication that the majority of voters are turned off by the extremes in both parties. And neither believe that either party adequately represents their views. They prefer a more moderate or centric perspective from the elected officials. Rather than doubling down on your party's current messaging, how can you show that you hear the voice of the people in your district?
That's a great question. And I want to preface it by saying that one of the reasons why the nonpartisan voting bloc has become so large is because voters are being registered to vote at DMV automatically. They're no longer being asked which party they would like to register for. So it's just an automatic voter registration. They're automatically voted nonpartisan. That creates a problem because if you've come from a state where it didn't matter because you had open primaries, you don't think anything of it. But when you come to a state that has a closed primary, it matters. And I know from knocking on doors that there are many individuals who are actually Democrats and who are actually Republicans who have said, I just don't want my neighbors, or I'm in business and I don't want people to know, so I just want to go nonpartisan. But if you say, well, is this an issue? Is this an issue? This person's going to, if they want to run, they have a particular candidate they'd like to be able to vote for, then you need to decide. And the deciding factor really is most of the time when I talk to people, and to your point, yes, we have to reach out to the nonpartisans. Statistics do show us, however, that about 60% of those nonpartisans have more conservative leaning views. So when we talk about things like limited government and free markets and lower taxes and safer communities and better schools, that relates to all of them. And all that's really a nonpartisan issue. That's better for all of Nevadans, right? And so when you talk about those issues, and then you talk about things like where the legislature has let us down, because we know 70% of the people want voter ID to vote, and yet the state legislature wouldn't pass voter ID. And we know that statistically, overwhelming majority of Nevadans have said they want to protect girls' sports and keep girls' sports fair and don't believe boys should be in girls' sports. And yet, the Nevada legislature, oftentimes they turn their back on the will of the people. They did the same thing with the funding of opportunity scholarships, AB 400 4 years ago. Overwhelmingly, 90% of Nevadans said, we want opportunity scholarships. We have 200 failing schools in Las Vegas, and the most impacted kids are those in the poorest communities. And our government had an opportunity to embrace those children and say, your education matters to us. Instead, they turned their back on all those children, and they unfunded the opportunity scholarships. So we need a legislature that is going to listen to people. And I'll tell you, it's kind of like being in an airplane. If you're on an airplane, do you want the right wing or the left wing to fall off? No. You need both of them. We need both of them for balanced government. And here's the thing balanced government does. Balanced government slows government down, which is good, and it makes both sides have to be part of the conversation and find some compromise. Right now we have one party rule, and so the reason the governor has had to veto so many bills is because it's just bad bills being pushed through in a very partisan fashion when the majority of Nevadans, they want balanced government. They just want you to do what's best for them. And that's what I want to do.
I can resonate with your analogy. My dad used to say all the time, no plane can fly with one wing.
That's right.
So I get that. And I think we can all agree what the issues are, may not on what the solutions are to those. Yeah. So having that voice being heard from a centric perspective is definitely will move us further, maybe slower, but better. Right. So with that ends the interview portion of today's event. I'd like to give you 1 minute to do a closing remark.
You know, I've listened to your interviews a lot. You guys didn't even ask me about a bill draft. And I was all prepared to tell you how bills are. No. Listen, I know. Yeah, that's a good question. And I have sat here and watched these interviews, and I'm like, how does somebody run for office and not know that process? But anyway, in any event, my name is Jill Douglas, and I am running to be the next Assemblywoman in Assembly 37 because, again, seniors, families, and veterans all deserve more from their government than they're currently getting. I'm a businesswoman. I built a business from scratch. You know, that business was very successful, but I understand what it's like to sign a paycheck. I understand the taxation on businesses. I understand the red tape that gets in the way. We need to do things to help businesses be more successful. We need to look for opportunity to reduce taxation so Nevadans have more in their pocketbooks. So I'm someone who focuses on what are the solutions that will help all Nevadans. To me, it's building stronger communities, stronger families, having better schools. And I will fight to ensure that Nevadans' voices are heard in Carson City because today they're not.
All right, well, thank you for that. This concludes today's event. Once again, I'd like to thank our sponsors for making today's event possible. Judge Mary Perry, Clark County District Court, Family Division, Department P. Christine Brewer, Clark County District Court, Family Division, Department S. Veterans in Politics International, and Nevada Veterans Association. Again, I thank our additional sponsors and community partners for their support, which helps us ensure a professional, fair, and transparent endorsement process. We're honored to have them with us today. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Join us every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Pacific Time, live stream on Facebook.